As you know, gardening is an exercise in patience. Sometimes it takes months, even years, to finally harvest what you've planted. In this chapter, since my vegetables aren't ready to pick, I just planted them, I'm gonna head on over to San Diego Seed Company that is teeming with abundant amounts of produce, and I'll show you some tips on how to know exactly when to harvest. In other words, when to pick your plants to maximize their freshness and their flavor. We're gonna tackle peppers, eggplants, and kale, so let's get to it. We've made it to San Diego Seed Company, and I can't wait to show you what some mature vegetables look like. Let's start off with one of my favorite plants to grow, peppers. They really can be harvested at any point in time. Let's just take the common jalapeno. We think of that as a green pepper, but you can let that go to red, and it gets a little bit sweeter, a little more complex flavor, and that heat drops off a little bit. So don't worry if you think that you let your peppers go too long. They can be harvested ripe, they can be harvested green, it's all good. Just a couple tips on harvesting your peppers. When you come in to harvest, if it is a hot pepper, don't touch any part of your body and wear gloves. One time, I hit my eye with a little bit of habanero hand, as I call it, and my eye was red for 5 hours, and it was a terrible, terrible mistake. Now, to harvest them, you don't want to rip it off the plant because you could damage the plant. What you want to do is grab some pruning shears, select the pepper you want to harvest, right where it starts to come out of the main stem, and just give it a quick clip. And you're good to go. The more you harvest your mature peppers, the more the plant's going to produce. So make it a habit to come out and actually clear out your bed of peppers every other day or so when they're starting to mature, so you get the most out of this crop. You can harvest pretty much all peppers this way, and a lot of other common plants in the veggie garden as well, like tomatoes, for example. Now that we've covered peppers, let's move on to leafy vegetables like kale. Kale, which is one of my favorite plants to grow and to eat, although it wasn't when I was a kid, but I've learned to love it. You have to use what's called the cut and come again method, where what you're doing is you're coming down and take off the leaves that are the lowest and largest and allowing the rest of the plant, you can see these leaves are much smaller up here, that are gonna mature and get a lot larger where I can harvest them. So to show you what that looks like after you've done it, all of this stem used to have leaves. They've been stripped bare, harvested down here, and the rest is continuing to grow up this way. That's a great way to get the same plant to produce more yield for you. And you can honestly do this with a lot of other leafy greens as well. Next, let's talk about eggplant. Now, in this beautiful eggplant patch, it can be a little difficult to know when it's ready to harvest. As a general rule of thumb, 65 to 90 days after you plant, that's when you should be coming out and taking a look at the patch. But even then, it's a little challenging until you use what's called the fingernail test. Come in with your thumb and make a slight depression right into the middle of that flesh and see how quickly it bounces back. If it bounces back really quickly and it's a flush surface again, you know it's ready to go. If it stays in and takes a while to come back out, it's underripe and you need to let it grow a little longer. And finally, if it's overripe, you'll start to see this beautiful magenta, deep purple color start to go orange, and that's how you know you've missed your harvesting window. So again, when harvesting your eggplant, it's the same rules as a pepper. Be gentle with it, use some pruning shears. Come in and just clip it off 1/2 inch to 1 inch above the cap. With eggplant, some of the secrets of knowing how ripe it is lie in looking at the seeds. Because again, you want to harvest eggplants when they're slightly underripe, which means the seeds are slightly less mature. So let's take a knife. Let's cut right down the middle of this bad boy. And take a look at that. The seeds are forming, but they're not all the way there yet, which means this eggplant's flavor is gonna be beautifully eggplanty and it's not gonna be bitter, because that's really the danger you run into with eggplants is underripe, it's bitter, overripe, it's really bitter. Now, if this was overripe, you would see these seeds be a lot darker in color, and if it was underripe, you would see there'd be no seeds at all. So we've harvested this at the absolute perfect time. In this chapter, you've learned how and when to harvest peppers, kale, and eggplants. So if you follow these tips, you're not only going to get the freshest and best tasting produce, but you'll actually maximize the amount of produce you get from your plants. So good luck in the garden and keep on growing.